Hi, I'm Shan Wu with a Under Color of Law take on Trump's firing, the massive firing of the inspector generals. Now, there's a lot of illegality about what he's done, but I also want to discuss the fact that it's really covering up something else. What's the real point of doing this? So let's start with how rich this commitment is to rooting out waste and fraud that we constantly hear from the Trump spokespeople, even Trump himself. They want to justify all sorts of things on this idea of we are rooting out waste and fraud. So let's take a look at Trump, or listen to Trump himself talking about that ill-fated memo he did where he was freezing all the federal assistance, which he blames on media confusion. Obviously, people were just reading his poorly written memo. It wasn't the media's interpretation that was being read. But take a listen to what he says.
There was a short-term pause or funding freeze on certain discretionary spending payments, such as government grants, only for us to quickly look at the scams, dishonesty, waste, and abuse that's taken place in our government for too long. As was explicitly stated, this in no way affected Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or other entitlements that Americans depend on. We are merely looking at parts of the big bureaucracy where there has been tremendous waste and fraud and abuse.
So you see, he's talking about how that memo was just part of their rooting out the fraud and waste aspect. Same thing over at the State Department. Remember, in addition or before that memo came out, they had the freeze on foreign aid. There's a lot of blowback on that. And the State Department put out a sort of a saving their face sort of message that Rubio, the new Secretary of State, has started humanitarian aid again, despite this foreign aid freeze. And they want to explain that what they're actually doing was that they were rooting out fraud and waste. So I think it's kind of ironic here. Let me point out what I posted about, which is make sure that I'm reading this right. They want to justify anything they do as rooting out fraud and waste, even as they lay waste to the very positions that are in place to root out fraud and waste. Those positions are the inspector generals. There's a long history of inspector generals across different agencies. It's continued to expand that position. And the point of the expansion is to look at ways in which agencies in the government aren't doing a good job of properly utilizing the funds that Congress has appropriated for them, our taxpayer funds. And over the years, their jurisdiction has expanded. They're often referred to as watchdogs, and that's true. But it's really expanded. They have a lot more authority now. They conduct their own, obviously, internal audits, but also internal investigations. They're interviewing witnesses. They even can be authorized to make arrests, and they have, they carry firearms. So it's very much a type of law enforcement agency in addition to the auditing capacity and overseeing that there aren't problems within the agency in terms of how they're using the funds. And whistleblowers come forward to them. The Justice Department's Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, who I've known for many years, we were young junior people at the Department of Justice, and later he was Chief of Staff to the Criminal Division head when I was Chief of Staff to Reno. He's been there a long time, and they are famous for taking very contrarian positions, criticizing the FBI, criticizing what's been done internally at Justice. He's not one of the ones that has been fired yet, although Trump has basically gone across the board and gotten rid of about, I think it's 17 and counting right now. It was all done in one fell sweep. So let's take a look at the State Department, just as an example, how they're trying to justify what they were doing when they froze the foreign aid under this category of, we're actually trying to make government more efficient. So among the things that they destroyed or stopped when they froze that aid was the world's largest HIV assistance program from this funding freeze that got stopped. And although Trump may describe that as tremendous waste and fraud and abuse, his Secretary of State, Rubio, now has to do a waiver that exempts humanitarian aid, which they're defining as life-saving medicine, food, shelter, the sorts of things that really make up, in my view, the bulk of the kind of aid assistance we give to other countries. The United Nations AIDS program was very happy that this waiver came out because there's an enormous amount of people that are affected by the AIDS support and HIV response. But that's still to the State Department, and their justification is that, oh, we're really just blocking woke programs. I mean, what's woke about humanitarian aid? I mean, maybe it is woke. It's because it's a humane thing to do. Maybe that's one way of thinking of woke policies. The State Department memo was sent to journalists, sort of saving face, saying that they're off to a great start. They've saved something like $1 million, $1 billion in spending not aligned with America First agenda has been prevented. Now, that is a very important point. Actually, I think it is 1 million. I'm having trouble remembering what they said in that memo. But when you compare that to the billions in foreign aid, that's obviously a ridiculous drop in the bucket. They'd have to be doing this like every single day, finding $1 million to save to get anywhere near that. But the key takeaway there is not aligned with an American First agenda. So the U.S. spends about $70 billion in foreign aids during fiscal year 2023, but they're busy rooting out the waste by, quote, blocking woke programs. What does that have to do with the purpose of the aid? They also claim that the way that they can root out this waste wouldn't be possible if these programs remained on what they call autopilot. Well, they're not on autopilot. What does that even mean? They're being administered every day by people who consider the uses and the purpose that Congress gave in appropriating the funds. So these are not programs on autopilot. What they are programs that have a purpose that the State Department wanted to stop by claiming that it's some sort of a woke program. So they've caved, right, to the pressure of some. And there's been a big public outcry about the humanitarian efforts being stopped, so they caved. And why did they cave? Well, Rubio is a former senator, right? He may still have hard baked into his psychology being worried about people's reactions. Notice I'm not saying he has a conscience. It's just a worry. He is a politician by nature. That's how he's been raised really now. And so they worry about the reactions, not necessarily worry about doing the right things, but they worry about the reactions. That's different than zealots, dictators, people part of a regime who only look to put down the reaction, cut it off. There's a difference there. So let's see how long someone like Rubio lasts in the Trump administration if he exhibits that kind of fear of following the regime's order. No, I'm not saying he's standing up, being a model of courage about this. It's just if he's worried. He's worried, this may not be a very good idea. I'm going to take a lot of blowback. Maybe it's illegal. He's scared of following the regime's orders. There is no room for that kind of fear in a dictatorship because you must fear the leader more than you fear anything or anyone else. Let's take another look at a different kind of reaction here to the firing of the inspector generals. Two old-time politicians, Senator Chuck Grassley and Dick Durbin, Senate Judiciary Committee, wrote a letter. We'll put up a screenshot of that. They basically want answers as to why the IGs were fired. Since it's illegal, you're supposed to give 30 days under that. And they want some reasons. They want the Trump administration to give the reasons why these folks were fired. In an interview, Grassley, who has a long history of being very much of an advocate for whistleblowers, big supporter of the IG group and the idea of it. When I used to bring cases, still do on occasion, under the false claims statute, which is all about sort of fraud on the government, Grassley was a big fan of that. He really believed in the power of whistleblowers. So interesting to see how he's going to react here. I doubt he's going to be as big of an advocate as he once was given the politics. But here's what he said in an interview. He said, quote, "There may be good reason the IGs were fired. We need to know that, if so. I'd like a further explanation from President Trump regarding the 30-day detailed notice of removal that they're supposed to provide." In other words, Congress is saying, hey, you're supposed to provide reasons for this, not just do it with no reasons at all. Another example of some pushback here, the USDA Inspector General, according to public reports, refused to recognize this illegal firing and was escorted out by security from their office. That's a good example of making the regime do things in sunlight. Now, other presidents have tried to get rid of IGs too. I mean, there's a natural tendency when an executive comes in, they want to kind of clean house, put their own people in. That's why there are definitions of how you do things. That's why there are processes. That's why there are laws. And the point of the Inspector General term is to have it long enough to survive, like the FBI Director term, to survive more than just a single administration. It gives them some more autonomy. So Ronald Reagan fired 16, but he relented after there was a bunch of congressional pushback, and he reinstated 5 of them, again, after Congress stood up and objected. Bush 1, George H., also tried to get rid of everybody, all the IGs, but he also relented when both the Inspector Generals and the Congress objected. President Obama dismissed one of the Inspector Generals. He offered very particular reasons, saying there was troubling, inappropriate conduct. Now, that Inspector General filed a lawsuit to get his job reinstated. That was fine. That's the process he's entitled to do. He lost on that. That's fine too. And Obama had given reasons to begin with, and he litigated in court. There was a process filed. Now, notice in Trump 1, his first time around, right? Who was he getting rid of in terms of Inspector Generals? He got rid of the intelligence Inspector General after he claimed that that person caused this whole Ukraine controversy with some fake report. That's the fake controversy that led to his first impeachment. He also got rid of the Health and Human Services IG, who was the acting IG, after they had noted the medical shortages during COVID. And according to Trump, she gave a fake report. So that's the theme, right? If the regime doesn't like it, it's fake, it's bad, and it's caused a fire. Now, they have learned a little bit now, right, in the second time around. They're not going to simply rely on Trump saying things like it's bad or fake. They're going to put it under the category of fraud and waste. So remember, we were previously discussing that failed freeze memo about how the Impoundment Act doesn't allow the executive to take away monies that Congress already appropriated just because they don't agree with the policies of it. So they can't do that. They can't just say, oh, these are all woke policies, we don't like it. But firing the IGs, putting in their own people, sets the stage for them to use a new term, which would be fraud and waste. This is one of many tactics they're going to be using to generally make end runs along the law. But there are signs, like what happened here, that there are going to be some obstacles that come up. Little ones, the letter from the senators. We'll see if Congress really has the gumption to really stand up against Trump the way other Congresses stood up against presidents trying to fire inspector generals. Kind of unlikely. There's also the individual bravery of that one inspector general refusing to go quietly, making them fire her and be let out. We need a lot of them to take that stand, not just in their offices refusing to go, but they need to take that stand legally. They need to sue for reinstatement. If all of these things begin to happen, legal resistance, using the legal structure of Congress demanding transparency and reasons, that's the way that you push back against a dictatorship. All right, that's it for now. We will talk to you soon. Thanks again for the comments, replies. I look forward to trying to reply to some of them when I can. And keep up the good work with us.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.